Hi everybody, this is Dr. Prafulla Dikshit, and in this series, or rather this video, we'll talk about time series analysis. Now, what is time series analysis? In order to understand it better, let's break it down into its constituent terms. First, let's talk about time. So everybody knows what is time. Everybody has his own perspective or an understanding of what is time. Everybody wants to, let's say, control time, say by making a schedule, or at least try to manage time to some extent, right? And when we are trying to either manage or control time, what we are in effect doing is we are trying to understand it better. So we are trying to study time, right? So in order to understand it, we want to study it. The best way to study anything is by breaking it down into its constituent pieces, and this is what we call analysis. So we want to analyze time in order to understand it. But what is it? What is it that we are analyzing in time? So when we say this, a phrase comes to mind, something like time goes on. Ring a bell? So when we say time goes on, it means time has an element of continuity, right? And what is it that is continuous? It is an aggregation of points in time. So basically, in time series analysis, we are studying a continuous series of points in time, right? So here we are with time series analysis. Okay, so in this video on time series analysis, we'll talk about, we've already talked about, very briefly about time itself, and we have related it to the term time series analysis, and in a way we have defined, or rather, introduced ourselves to this term called time series analysis. And the next thing we'll discuss is what is a time series. Then we'll talk about discrete versus continuous concept of time series. And in order to understand time series analysis, we study its properties, and we'll discuss why to study them. And then we'll talk about one of the most important, the fundamental properties of time series, that is correlation, which is the basis for the actual property of time series, which is autocorrelation. Of course, there are many more properties, but then we'll restrict ourselves to these two properties in this particular video. So now, what is a time series? So a time series is actually any property or any quantity that is measured over time. So we can say that time series is any property or value, say x t, xt, xt, okay, which is which is measured over a series of continuous and equally spaced points in time, right? And the number of points in time, we denote it by the points in time, are denoted by t up to n. Okay, t up to n. Right. So when we say t up to n, it means t is equal to, it's starting from, n equal to 1, right, up to say 1, 2, 3, 4, and up to n. So there are n points in time, and they're equally spaced, and they're sequential, they're continuous. And when we measure any series or any quantity over this, series of periods or points in time, this is called a time series. So it is important to note that it's not just time that we are measuring in a time series. What we are measuring is a property or a quantity or an attribute of any entity or a process over a period of time. And that is what we call a time series. So how is a time series different from, other forms of data? Well, the most important thing is that other forms of data are measured, say for example, regression data for, univariate regression analysis, or even multivariate regression analysis. Usually the variables are measured at a single point in time, even if there are n instances of that variable measured at that point in time, but it is a single point in time. But in time series, a single variable or multiple variables can be measured over multiple time points, and that is why we call it time series. So they can be a single time series, they can be a multiple time series, right? So talking about some examples of time series, one of my favorite examples is of stock time series data, and one of my favorite stocks is APL, that is Apple Computers. And let's see, we have it here, right? So this is the time series for the a 1-day stock price fluctuations of AAPL, that is Apple company, Apple Incorporation. And we can view it for say over 1 day, over 5 days. This is the 5-day data. This is the 1 month data. This is the 6 months time series data, right? We can see it over 1 year as well. So as you can see, the shape of the curve, the ups and downs, they are yeah, you can see that these shapes and curves are changing with the time span over which we are watching the time series. And of course, coming back, another example is weather or rainfall data, rainfall data. So in rainfall data, we have here, so this is all India rainfall time series data. As you can see, this green line shows a kind of a normalized time series, whereas the actual time series obtained over a period of time, this is actually from 1961 to 2010. So this is the amount of rainfall we got between 1961 to 2010 measured over a 1 year period, right? Okay. Now talking about discrete versus continuous property of time series data. Time itself is a continuous quantity, a continuous entity, or a continuous concept. But since us human beings can conceive and see things only discretely and not continuously, in our perception. So in order to study things, we try and simplify them, and discreteness is one of the ways of simplifying the continuous nature of time series, right? So, and this is one of the important properties of time series. Now, what are the properties of time series and why do we study them? Well, a time series of actually is of no use if we cannot study the relationships between the elements of time series, right? And in order to understand and apply the relationships between the time series elements to our problems, we should be aware of the underlying conceptual relationships. So the concept of correlation is important and fundamental to studying or understanding uh, the the quantities that are measured in time series analysis. Just imagine in correlation, there are, we are studying at least two variables either over a period of time or, or cross-sectionally, which vary and how do they vary together, right? So there are two variables, say x and y variable, which vary together, and the extent of their joint variability, we can say it is their correlation. Okay, right. Now we have different examples. For example, how does say the stock price of Apple vary with the stock price of say another company, maybe Microsoft, or how does the stock price of Apple vary with uh, say maybe the GDP or rate of unemployment, whatever. So we can study these relationships. Or on the other hand, in weather data, we can study how rainfall varies with humidity, right? But in time series analysis, in fact, what we study and what is more important is how does, say, for example, how does uh, the present value of the stock of Apple varies or is affected by its past values, right? Now, this is of essence. So we say we study, for example, the value of the Apple stock price 3 days ago and how it would affect the, the stock price today. You know, so the correlation between the prices of you know x minus 3 days. That is, if x is today and if x varies, right? So tomorrow will be 3 days before tomorrow. That is, so we have a lag of 3 days here. So we're measuring x minus 3, x and x minus 3. We're measuring the correlation between x point in time and x minus 3 point in time, so to say. So what would be the correlation between the value of stock on any given day minus its value 3 days prior to that? Similarly, we can measure the correlation or autocorrelation between the time series of rainfall. For example, uh, just like we had this, this series. Say, for example, we see Right here, if we want to study how is the value at this point is affected by, say, any random value, say maybe at this point, which is say 3 points back in time, right? So how does this value affect this value, or this value affects this value, or maybe this value affects this value? So all this constitutes what we call autocorrelation, right? Uh, Autocorrelation is something we'll discuss in more detail in the subsequent videos. But this is about it for this particular video. And just let me know how you like the video. Do not forget to subscribe my channel. And if you really liked it, do give it a thumbs up. Thank you for now. Have a good time. Bye-bye.